I just think we found her car.
How does that car end up in the water?
It was surreal. I mean, it really was.
This individual that was leaving notes on her vehicle and doing weird things.
The divers are in the water and you get the hit.
I would call it divine intervention.
Oh my God, this is her plate.
Welcome to The Takeaway. I'm Alex Maragos. Exactly 42 years ago today, a 23-year-old woman from Elgin, Illinois, named Karen Schepers went missing after a night out with coworkers. Then, just a few weeks ago, her car and her body were found submerged inside the Fox River. The case had baffled detectives for decades and had gone cold. That is until the formation of a cold case unit. Detectives Andrew Houghton and Matt Vartanian formed that unit and also started a podcast, taking listeners through their whole progress, their setbacks, and their theories about what happened to Karen 42 years ago. I have both detectives with me here today on the podcast. Welcome to you both. Thank you for the time and joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. We appreciate it.
So what a journey that you have been on from first forming this unit last year and then taking a deep look at Karen's case. For people who may not be familiar, I don't know who wants to go first. First, just tell us, who was Karen Schepers?
Yeah, Karen Schepers was 23 years old. She was born in California and then moved to Iowa when she was a kid. And then her and her family moved to Sycamore, Illinois, and she lived there for most of her, years growing up. Mm-hmm. She had 8 brothers and sisters. And then when she got out of high school, she moved to Elgin and was working at a place called First Card, which was kind of like Visa. She worked as a computer programmer there, and was just living kind of her best life. She had purchased a car, purchased a piano. She was very responsible. She had life insurance. She had saved up quite a bit of money. She was making around $25,000 a year in 1983, which was a lot of money at the time. Mm-hmm. So she kind of had everything kind of going for her in her life and was looking to get married and do all those kind of things moving forward.
It doesn't seem like a stereotypical case of somebody who would just up and disappear. Mm-hmm. Take me through, Matt, what was Karen's last day? Everything you know about it.
So that was a Friday. So it was actually tax day, April 15th of 1983. We know that she was at work. At some point throughout the day, she finished her work. We don't know if she went home first and then went out to PM Bentley's, but we do know that there was a recent promotion or a group of people that graduated from a programming course within the company. So a group of coworkers decided to go out that night to celebrate. They went to PM Bentley's, which was a bar in Carpentersville, Illinois. They got there, somewhat early in the evening. We know throughout the night that there was a hula hoop contest that she had participated in. We know at one point about 9 or 9:30, she did make a phone call to her fiance, Terry Schultz. She wanted him to come out to the bar. He declined. We know during that time, just through talking to different people, that she was pretty upset about that. We had somebody report that she was crying after that phone call. But from what we know about Karen, that didn't let her down. She decided to say, okay, he's not going to come out. I'm not going to let it ruin my night. So she went on to participate in the hula hoop contest. And it just seemed like she was having a good time, based on what everybody told us.
Yeah, and then about 12:30, 1 o'clock, the hula hoop contest had ended, mm-hmm. and no one really saw her leave, at least up to this point that we've talked to. So her and her car both disappeared after that point. So you're talking 1 a.m., around 1:30 a.m. maybe, on April 16th. She's seen the last time, and then she's never seen again.
Yeah.
So when she disappears, How big of a deal was it, and what kind of effort was put in to figure out what happened? Because
so
it must have taken a lot of people by surprise.
Yeah, she actually wasn't reported missing until that following Monday. So that was a Friday night into Saturday morning. So all day Saturday, all day Sunday, and then she doesn't show up to work on Monday morning. Mm-hmm. And there's some coworkers that obviously were aware of that. They make contact with her fiance, Terry, mm-hmm. Who then reports to the police that she had gone missing.
Yeah.
And then the investigation from there, a lot of work went in to try to find her.
The police did some stuff back then that would be different. I mean, it'd be similar to what we do now,
Sure.
just not to the same level. Yeah. So if you think back 42 years, a missing person is slightly different than now. Today, we would be potentially looking at cell phone records. We'd be looking at video, from the bar. We'd be looking at maybe GPS on cars. They didn't have that then. Yeah. So what they did is they went up to the bar. They interviewed some of the people that were working that night. They talked to some of the coworkers that were at the party. They checked her bank records to see if she used her bank card, and nothing really came from that. And at that point, there weren't a lot of other leads for them to follow up on. They did do some aerial searches with planes to fly over different bodies of water and different, fields. some wooded areas, some scrap yards, because she had a very distinctive car. It was this bright yellow, canary yellow Toyota Celica. So they searched for her that way, but that was kind of the extent of what they did.
Yeah.
They then were able to send out things called leads messages to other states. So they're looking for, hey, was her car pulled over? Was her car impounded? Did police have contact with her or her car? And they did that to all 50 states and had nothing. So, the family kind of took it from there and started doing a lot of things on their own as well, putting up missing flyers, things like that for her. But no real leads came in, in that 83, 84 time frame. And then the case kind of went cold.
Yeah, her dad was a pilot for United Airlines. So he went as far as actually running a plane and going up and doing his own aerial searches to see if maybe you could see it in a body of water or in a wooded area. Maybe there's some disturbed debris from a car accident or something like that. So that's the extent that the family did too.
Gotcha. Then the department makes this cold case unit, which is you two.
Mm-hmm.
You take a look at this case first heavily.
Yeah.
You collect all the information. I'm sure it's just painstaking work through every single file, every single interview.
Yeah.
And then you have 6 theories that you go to talk about in Somebody Knows Something. And one of them is that something happened on the way home.
Yeah.
And that a body of water may have been involved. You looked at maps, you looked at the aerial photos.
Yep.
What led you to believe, first of all, that this was as plausible a theory as anything else?
Yeah.
And then take us through what happened to then lead up to the search on the river.
Yeah. For us, we always knew that we were going to search bodies of water. It was just a matter of when. I think looking at this case early on, the thing that kind of stuck out to us is we never had a body and we never had a car.
Right.
We are both, we would consider ourselves true crime junkies. So we listen, we listen to podcasts, documentaries, things like that. And usually you'll have one of those two things turn up over the years.
Both are gone.
Yeah. In Karen's case, we had neither. So we didn't think it was that far outside the, the realm of possibility that she could be in a body of water. So when we looked at where we knew, there was confirmation that she was at PM Bentley's that night. And then we looked at where she lived, which was on the east side of Elgin. When you take those two, points right there and you look at them and you say, well, there's lots of bodies of water, the biggest being the Fox River.
Yeah.
We knew at some point we were going to do it. It was just a matter of finding the right company to, help us out with it. We had no experience on how do you do that? Do you do sonar? Do you just drive a boat around? I mean, truly no way to know how to do that. So it was a matter of, us getting in touch with the group Chaos Divers. Retired Elgin police officer Mike Goff actually got us in touch with them. And it was a matter of coordinating with them, getting them up at the right time to do it.
And this is a volunteer group that does this all over the country all the time.
They do.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they do not charge law enforcement. They do not charge families. They are completely either self-funded or through donations. And they will answer the phone for a family and go look. They will answer phones for law enforcement and go look. They will look at cases themselves and go look. But they do it for a positive reason. It's not like they're out there just trying to get clicks on Facebook or clicks on YouTube. They really are out there trying to find people and bring them home.
Yeah.
So now it's late March.
Yeah.
This is one of several theories. You don't know what you're going to find. You've got great people with you in Chaos Divers.
Yeah.
How did you pick this spot on the river to know, okay, maybe we should look here?
So we had looked at a bunch of aerial photos. It took us several months to kind of do the logistics of the search. People would tell us, well, how hard is it to just search the water? And it's like,
it's a big river.
Yeah. Absolutely.
A lot has changed in 40 years, 40 plus years. You're looking at, are the roads the same? What are the road conditions? What are the lighting conditions? We looked at all those different things. Like, did these roads exist back then? We also had to look at maps and say, hey, here's a body of water that did not exist in 1983. So we're not going to search that now because it didn't exist then. So we did all those kinds of things. We had to do research on the weather, things like that. And I think to sort of answer kind of what you'd asked before too, when we looked at the car, it was like, okay, the car is either a crime scene and someone got rid of it, or the car is still with her on her drive home in some capacity. So when we found out that the flood stage for the river was one of the highest recorded ever at that point, we both felt pretty confident that, hey, this could be something we really do need to look at. The Chaos Divers group basically said, hey, the best way to do this is probably to bite off the biggest chunk first. Okay. So we were going to do the Fox River from the Kimball Street Dam in the south to basically Illinois Route 72 in the north. And then we had planned, because it was so flooded, we were going to go below the dam. We were going to go above the dam. You start planning of, if she's driving and maybe there's standing water on the roadway, maybe she has to turn around and take a different route. So we had these different routes we had planned out. We wanted to look at bodies of water on those specific routes. But when the group came up, they had 25 or 30 more bodies of water in addition to what we were going to look at. And they were going to spend up to 5 to 7 days with us, really casting a big net across that whole area. because we felt that if we find the car, that gives us an answer. If we don't, and we do a really extensive search, that gives us a lot of information too. Because now you start thinking, okay, is there some sort of foul play involved? Like, why is this car missing? Because we've checked all the reasonable places where it would be when you think of a body of water.
Yeah, I think it's, we've had a lot of questions about why it took 42 years for law enforcement to do this, right? We can't speak for the previous versions of law enforcement that touched this case. I mean, the case was investigated in the 80s by the Elgin Police Department, in 88 or 89 by the Illinois State Police, and then in 2009, the Elgin Police Department looked at it again. Never had a full-time cold case unit back in 2009. So in our case file and in our investigation, we never knew if bodies of water searches were ever done.
Yeah.
We felt it was very important to be as thorough as possible. I mean, that's just who we are as individuals and then as detectives. So we felt it was the right thing to do to make sure that we did that, just in case. And then kind of how everything took off, in that week of March, we knew we were going to do it.
Yeah. And so were you on the boat the whole time with the divers?
Yes.
Okay. So you're going, okay, over here, over there.
Yeah.
And then what I found is you talk about in your podcast, it took the diver Jacob 3 to 4 passes in that same spot.
Yeah.
To find the car.
Yeah. So that day, we pushed off early in the morning. Jacob was the driver of the boat. He went over that area initially and
with
thought
the sonar.
Yeah. So they have a couple different sonar that they use. So he had thought, there's like a little tiny channel in that area. It's like anywhere from 6 to 10 feet. He thought he had maybe saw something early on, but there was some debris in that area. I think there was a couple logs. There was some.
There's a big pipe, like a culvert. We had a tractor tire. They found 2 other vehicles.
I was saying you found 2 other cars in the river, which
were not
completely
intact, but were there. So we had the diver, Mike McFerrin was his name, dive on those cars.
Yeah.
The first car we felt might be her car because he dove down, he pulled up not a license plate, he pulled up a headlight, and it was a similar style of headlight. We're like, okay, we're sending pictures back to people, we're looking online, they're trying to find part numbers, all that kind of stuff. And he dove it 3 or 4 times and came up with a gas cap that was a circular gas cap, and we knew from photos of her car that her car actually had a like rectangular or square gas cap with a key in it. Or a key lock in it, so we knew that was not her car.
Take us through just your emotions at this point. Oh my gosh, we found a car. We've got to get her. And then you have to be riding up and down.
Oh my gosh.
Also on behalf of the family, who you're going to deliver news to.
Yeah, because even the first car, you're kind of like, okay, and then they connect the headlamp, and you're like, okay, and you're kind of going through. And he dove it multiple times and kept pulling pieces off it. They just kept breaking away. So he came up with a license plate bracket, but no plate. And you're like, okay. And they said, can you go again? He goes again. And he did it multiple times.
The water's 40 degrees too.
And then when you rule that out, it's kind of a letdown, right? You're kind of like, okay, here we go.
I think we thought the word that describes our emotion that week was cautiously optimistic.
Okay.
And when you find that car and it's coming up in pieces, there's a bit of a deflating feeling, right? Where you're like, okay, like if the car's coming apart, there's no way anything's inside of it, right? And then we find out that, the gas cover, was a different shape than what Karen's was. So there's a feeling of, all right, let's push on here. You're kind of, just a little like, I guess sad is a good word to put it. So that day we continued to then push north on the river and search and went all the way up almost into East Dundee. And we know that north of 90, the river is very shallow now. Never used to be that way because they removed a dam recently. So the water was a little bit deeper. So we had thought that area just north of 90, there's a road called Duncan Avenue. And there's a couple spots where the river is very close to Duncan Avenue. And we thought those were some very plausible points where, you take all the factors that we knew about that night, that a car of her size could have went in the river there, but then we didn't find anything.
It's also funny to go back in time. 42 years ago, you're dealing with so many other things, not just the technological challenges of solving this crime, but I love how you guys talked about cars were a lot heavier back then.
Yeah.
There were no airbags. There were seatbelts, but just like things you don't think about now. And the car was small, even though it was heavy. And so that creates an added difficulty. So take me to the moment then, the divers are in the water and you get the hit.
It was about 4:40, 4:45 in the afternoon. We were literally on our way back and saying, hey, let's start looking at what we're going to do the next day. So we were planning going south of the dam. Matt had reached out. We were trying to figure out if that had been previously dredged or drained because there's an island, like a man-made island that's built there in Elgin. So we were looking at that. We were talking about what our day is going to be. And we were basically going to head in. We even called one of the guys in the command post, says, hey, we need to ride back to the command post. Can somebody come pick us up? And Jacob, I don't know if you call it intuition or whatever, kind of came through the same area where we found these other cars and said, let me just check this again. We found a couple things here already. It's always good to just double check because we were going to be done with that section of the river forever.
Yeah.
Like we were not going to go
That
back
was it.
there.
Yeah.
And so he kind of went around, was like, okay, here's this pipe that we saw. Here's this, tire. Here's these other cars. And he kind of circled. He's like, I think I see something. And he kind of went around, and you had to get the sonar just at the right angle to see what it was. And he literally just goes, that's a car. That's on its top. That's a tire. That's a tire. It's a smaller car. Those are going to be the windows. It's on its roof. I'm 100% that's a car. And we said, okay. And he had to go to the diver, Mike, who had taken all of his gear off because we were getting ready to go back in. And he says, Mike, buddy, can you go in one more time? And he said, yeah, I can do it. So he got his stuff on, and we were kind of standing in the back of the boat talking. We recorded a little bit for our podcast, just saying, hey, we're on our third car of the day. This is kind of where we're at. And he was down for probably 6 minutes. The other dives.
How deep is that water there?
It's
about 8 feet.
Okay.
So the other cars he dove on were, 2 minutes, 3 minutes at the most. So he's down there quite a while, and we're kind of talking like, all right, he's been down there, a while. And he came through the surface, and he just kind of holds the plate up. And you immediately,
First thing you saw out is the plate.
as soon as you
But it's
look,
very
you
dirty.
can
It's
tell
hard to
he's
read.
holding a license plate. And we both are like, he's holding a license plate. So the front side is covered in mud because it's been exposed,
Right.
and it would be, oxidized, everything else. The underside has been pinned against the car, so it's almost pristine. You can kind of see it's stamped, from the reverse.
Right.
So we could see it in reverse and kind of upside down from 40 or 50 feet away, maybe. And I don't think either of us said anything out loud, but I'm looking at it and I'm like, that's an X and that's a P, almost positive.
Yeah.
So we're trying to kind of run to the front of the boat and get through the cabin to get up there. And as he's swimming over, he's kind of reading the plate off to us. I think he transposes one of the numbers or says 1919 or something. And we go, yeah, that's her plate. He goes, I think he says like, son of a bitch, that's her car. And he goes, I knew it was yellow. And he hands Matt the plate, and we just kind of look at it, and it's kind of this, oh my God, this is her plate.
There's a feeling of emotion in that moment. I mean, we're not big emotional guys, I would say, but there was definitely a power in that moment where you're just like, you have 6 months of investigating this case, and then you hold something tangible in your hand, and there's the shock, there's the disbelief, there's the emotion of like, I just think we found her car. And like the overwhelmingness of that feeling is just indescribable.
I think the more shocked people were probably in the command post, because I then get on the radio and I say, hey, we do have a license plate here. It's X-Ray P-Paul 8919. That's her license plate. I think we have her car. And I think they're kind of talking to them afterwards. They were like, wait, what? You guys, you have the car? And we're like, yeah, we have the car.
But I have to imagine for you guys, and maybe any cold case detective out there, have you guys like dreamed of that plate? Like, do you see this case in like when you're asleep? Like seriously, because it takes so much time that you guys know this inside and out in your sleep, and then for that moment to become real has to just.
We would talk about it because I live north of Elgin, so I drive on the west side of the Fox River, and I drive along the river to go home. And Matt and I would talk about, I would drive home, and we hadn't even looked at the west side of the river yet.
Right.
So the bar was on the east side.
On the east side of
Yes.
the
Yeah, the bar is on the east side. Her house is on the east side. If she decided to go to her boyfriend's house, it's on the east side. So we hadn't even done the west side. The dive group was going to come back and do the entire west side, a bunch more bodies if we didn't find her. And I would drive home and just think, man, here's this thing we go over here and there's water here. Like, what if she crossed the river? And you're kind of always thinking like, do we need to expand to somewhere else? And you're kind of always talking about what if she went a different way? And you start thinking like, how far out can we reasonably go? Because you really want to cover everything you can. And you're just kind of thinking outside the box of, do we need to go on the west side? Do we need to go north? Like, do we need to start looking further into Cook County? Do we need to get maps from Cook County? Because you're always planning that, I don't know, are we going to miss something and then, not find anything?
Yeah, I think, in casework, you want to have a healthy balance, between being on duty and off duty, right? A case like this, I think, transcended those lines where you just started to kind of really think about it all the time. We would text each other when we were both off duty and, throw out theories and ideas, like Andrew said, about what we thought would have happened. And it's just still truly surreal how it kind of went down the way it did.
Well, we were in constant contact with the family too. So I'm calling or texting, the sister, the mom, the brother, the other brother, some of the friends that we talked to in the podcast during the week, like, hey, we're doing this. Or if we were going to do a media, we're going to be on whatever media, we would let them know that in advance so that they knew that. We're trying to keep them in the loop. So we were, off duty and still making phone calls or texting or emailing people.
Yeah.
And I know part of that conversation is sacred between you and the family, but just take us to the room about, you had been constantly updating. Of course, you incorporated some of their interviews into your podcast. Take us to that moment, especially for Karen's mother, who's 90 and still alive.
Yeah.
What that moment was like?
Yeah. What I'll share with is Liz asked us how we were doing during that week.
How you were doing.
How we were. And I was taken aback by that because this poor woman who has not known what happened to her daughter for 42 years. She's 90 years old. She had the time to ask us how we were doing. And to me, that just shows you the caliber of the human being that you're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she put aside her feelings and her emotions, and she asked us how we were doing.
Yeah.
And that's the caliber of the family members that you're dealing with the Schepers family.
Yeah, I think they say, or they've said to us, or they've said in like statements that what we did is we called Susan, that would be Karen's sister.
Okay.
Yeah.
We had arranged that we didn't want to just call the mom on the phone. She's 90 years old. I didn't want to give her, and Matt didn't want to give her like false hope.
Yeah.
We didn't want to do a search and then call her and have her think, why are they calling me? So we coordinated where we would tell the sister over the phone. She was okay with that. And then we drove out there to meet them in person. And calling Susan, you know, we found the plate within 10 minutes. I'm like, we need to call her. We got to the shoreline and we both called our supervisor and said, hey, I know this is the plate, but I need you to tell me again that this is the plate, because I need to hear it from you again before we call her. And he said, yeah, that's the right plate.
Yeah.
So we called and told her over the phone. And I think it was probably a mixture of just shock and also relief, but they said time kind of stopped. And we went and told Liz, and I mean, she kind of deflated a little bit. You know, it's kind of a kind of moment. But I think at that point, everyone felt pretty confident that we were going to hopefully also find Karen.
Yeah.
Telling them that we actually found her and could identify her was a very emotional like experience, I think, for them and for us.
Yeah.
And just, you know, her mom said, I want to have a funeral. I want to have a burial. Like she wanted to go through that whole process for her daughter.
Yeah.
And so it was surreal. I mean, it really was.
Especially after you guys were able to pull out the car virtually intact out of the water, have the remains, get those to the coroner, get the positive identification. And I know the case is still active, that there's still some things that you guys are working on. Yeah. But I know what everybody's wondering right now is, how does that car end up in the water?
Yeah.
Can you expand on any theories for how Karen's car you said it was flooded?
Yeah.
You took us through in the podcast that it was very dark that night.
Mm-hmm.
Take me from there.
I think there's different points in the river that are close to the roadway, and there are different points of roadways that are close enough or come into contact, you know, towards the river, that we feel confident that it's going to be a situation where, you know, no one put her in the river type of situation. We're still waiting for final, you know, information on that, but we've had a master technician from Toyota come out and assess all the mechanics of the car. We've had our crash team look at the car for defects, injuries to the car, I guess, if you would want to call it that, and things like that. We can't go much more than that, but I don't think that it's going to be something crazy where it's like, oh, someone put this car in the river with her in it. We don't believe that that's going to be the case.
Yeah. Another big piece is waiting on the coroner reports too.
But yeah, we have to wait for that kind of stuff.
Yeah. To determine the cause of death.
The fact it was flipped over, does that mean anything?
So I don't think so. And the reason I say that is we learned working with chaos divers is most cars, when they go in the river, they're going to tend to, or a body of water, I should say, they're going to want to flip upside down. Okay. The reason for that, specifically Karen's case, we know that the windows were up in the car. The only window that was busted out was the rear hatchback. So it's, you know, our theory is she goes in the river. We know that it was cold that night. So there's all that oxygen that's inside, you know, in the passenger compartment. Then you have the air that's also inside the tires too. So generally a car's going to want to kind of nose down. That's the heaviest part of the car, is the engine. So it's going to want to go down, and eventually a car will, if it does sink, it's not going to settle. It's going to still kind of bob up inside down on the water. And eventually at some point it'll flip upside down because of the tires. So you take all that into consideration, and, you know, the things that we're still waiting to hear back on the vehicle, you know, it's safe to assume that maybe she didn't go in upside down, you know, maybe that the car just went in right side up, and at some point it didn't flip, based on chaos divers telling us that.
They had said too that, you know, a car could travel a mile, even upwards of a mile, depending on the current. You just won't know that for certain.
Right.
Yeah.
But we know that the base of the Fox River, or the bed of the Fox River, was basically, it wasn't sunk in like mud and muck. It was sitting on top of everything mostly. So it's not like Matt said, if it was really silty and really, you know, mucky, a car would not go as far, because once it hits the bottom and is weighted down, it's going to sink into that mud.
Yeah.
The bottom was basically almost like a clay, I think they kind of described it as. So it was literally sitting on top of there, and it was not silted in, is what they would call it. Like we didn't have to like pop it out of the mud.
Yeah.
They made sure they secured it in case we did have some sort of issue, because you didn't want the car to break apart or have windows explode out of the car.
Right. Yeah.
But we know that the windshield was intact, the driver's side windows were intact, the passenger side windows were intact.
And you were able to get some personal effects of Karen's car.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got a sapphire ring that she wore every day. It was her birthstone ring. And then we got a tassel, the metal part of the tassel for her 1977 class of Sycamore High School tassel. We were able to give those back to her mom a couple days after we got the car.
Yeah.
When it came out that in 2022, a fisherman found what turned out to be the car, but it was initially thought to be an ATV or UTV that was in. What went through your mind then when you maybe could have found this out 3 years earlier?
Yeah, I remember the night that we found out about that, and there was the feeling of being kind of upset about it, and more upset because of the family. We didn't want to take what the family was feeling, any of their feelings away because of the thing that happened with the fire department and the fishermen. I will say this, that I'm very, very thankful that our police department and the fire department came out in front of it as they did. They admitted that there was a mistake that was made, and out of that bad situation, there was a lot of good that came out of that. They changed their protocols. If that were to happen again, I can guarantee that the fire department will probably dive on a vehicle. And the most important thing was the family wasn't really that upset by it. They were just very thankful that, they found Karen. We have an answer for them. That was the big part of it. And that truly is like the most important thing to me, but there was a lot of good that came out of that situation.
It's frustrating because obviously we would like to know that information.
Sure.
We didn't have it. However, the way that we were able to get the car out with chaos divers on board, I don't know that in 2022 we would have known how to do that.
Yes.
And our fear would be that we don't put an air bladder in the car, which is what they did to seal the entire car up, so you don't have reverse pressure when they move the car, so that the car contents don't come out, so that the car stays intact.
Yeah.
We may have just hooked a tow hook to it and pulled it out, and you might have ripped the car in half, and we would lose human remains. We would not have these items to get back to the family. So I think all in all, it came around the best way it could, where we were able to recover the car the best way that we could now, which I don't know we would have done that in the past.
Yeah, I think when you look at everything and talking with the family and talking with chaos divers, I would call it divine intervention, how things went down in March. There was a reason that group of people were together, and it was the time to bring Karen home. We had one of her friends tell us, recently, it was Denise, probably 2 or 3 months ago, one of her friends that said, I think she's ready to come home. So you start to hear all these little pieces of everything, and it just seems like we don't believe it was a coincidence of how she was recovered.
So any cold case investigator dives in again, not knowing how it's going to turn out.
Yeah.
You guys are 1 for 1.
Yeah.
You were able to get a solution and a resolution to this case.
Yeah.
It's just an amazing thing. And on top of that, you have a podcast going all the way through. So what do you think the podcast added or was able to enhance by the fact that you're doing this work anyway, but then you're also bringing in an audience to help you, send tips, and really go through everything so thoroughly?
Yeah, our goal from the beginning was to be able to bring those tips in and just generate new information and new interest in these cases. That was the big thing. The first thing that we did is we talked with the family. We wanted to make sure that they were on board with us bringing this back out, because we didn't want to open any old wounds or anything like that. If they wanted to let it lie, then we would have said, we're going to leave it alone. But throughout the podcast, we received new information. We learned about, Susanna, who was a bartender at PM Bentley's, and this individual that was leaving notes on her vehicle and doing weird things, So that was all new information that we found out. So that kind of helped us kind of think about maybe a different theory. Then we found out about the carnival as well that was in the parking lot. So,
and in other cases, these may turn out to be theories that end up getting you to the resolution. It didn't so happen in this one, but that's really important for detectives to open up new ideas of thought.
Yeah, we never wanted to be exploitative in any way. We didn't want it to be about us or the department. That's not what it's about. It's about getting the answers for the family and the victims. That was our number one motivation. It still remains that.
I think doing the podcast too, we had more media interest than you maybe would have with us just saying, hey, we started a cold case unit and we're looking at these cases. It was an innovative way to also get media coverage for what we were doing. And then when people saw that media coverage, it drove people to the podcast, and it drove people to our transparency site to give tips. And it drove people to see us on whatever media outlet. And then we would get tips that way as well. So it was the podcast helping us transition to other media that would kind of get more tips to come in from people.
And before we get to what's next, because you have what I see 36 cold cases total in Elgin, what are still the biggest unanswered questions in your minds with the Karen Schepers case?
Yeah, I think the why and the how. Those are the two that we would love to be able to get the answers for the family if we can. We've had conversations with them. We may not be able to officially say that, right? But I think we can probably rule out some things that didn't happen to her.
Right.
And if we can provide those answers for the family, I think that's some pretty solid closure for the case. And we've received that feedback from them also.
Okay. Andrew, anything else?
I just think you'll never know 100% exactly what happened. I think we'll be able to paint a pretty good picture based on what we know now about the car and what we're waiting on with the remains.
Yeah.
But, you would love to know which specific route did she take, which specific area did she go into the river. We just may never know that. We have some potential ideas, but you just never know 100%.
And I know you got a couple episodes left of Somebody Knows Something on the Schepers case. Can you look ahead at all, or can you break any news on what the next case that you're going to look at is going to be?
We're not really sure. We've looked at some other homicide cases.
Okay.
This case, we've kind of called it sort of a unicorn in the fact that we had no forensic evidence, we had no crime scene, we had no body, we had no vehicle. We felt like, hey, we can give out pretty much everything because the goal was to find the car and to find her. If we'd have done that and we found something crazy, we could kind of pump the brakes and start holding back information.
Right.
But the goal was to find something first.
Yeah.
With a homicide case, we have to kind of be a little bit more careful in terms of what information we release. If we're looking to charge a case, we don't want to give out information that could be problematic for us to go to trial, things like that.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a process, but I believe we will do another season. It will most likely be a homicide as opposed to a missing person case.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have other people calling you, or at least flooding in tips on the other cases that aren't related to Karen too, and that gives you more to handle in a good way.
Yes.
On all this. That's interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so it's been a really interesting conversation, not just to learn about the ins and outs of the investigation, but the podcast and all the things you guys had to go through to get to this point. And I know there's still some things to come with your answers. But Andrew, I'll start with you. I want to know, what is your one takeaway from working on this case, from walking listeners through it on the podcast? What are you taking away from this case?
I'll sort of give you kind of two quick ones. One, doing the podcast really did help us structure the investigation, I think, to some degree. So I would hope that other law enforcement agencies would consider doing something like this and thinking outside the box and embracing doing something different. It wasn't our idea to do a podcast. Our chief came to us and said, hey, this is what I'm kind of thinking. And we were a little resistant to that because we've never done that before. But you have to kind of put yourself in that position where you're a little bit uncomfortable and try to do that, because it did generate a lot of leads. It generated a lot of interest. It helped us structure the investigation a little bit better. And it helped us think outside the box in terms of using people like chaos divers too. Law enforcement sometimes is very resistant to say, hey, let's take this outside company that's not law enforcement and have them help us.
Yeah.
You really need to embrace that. You need to embrace the new technology and the new platforms you can use to try to get information, to generate leads, to generate tips, and to work on a case and to make it solvable.
Matt, same question. What's your takeaway from this whole experience?
Yeah, I think it's very important to get outside of your comfort zone. And, law enforcement, you tend to try to stay behind a wall, right? Like where you don't want to put all that information out there. And for us,
we're on the other end of that wall trying to get the information from you guys.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where, you have to be able to trust the community, right? I mean, it's a two-way street. You don't really know each other. You have to build up that trust. But for us, we were transparent because we wanted the community's help. And even though there wasn't a direct tip that found her, we still had all the public help us and support us and spread the word about Karen and her case and the podcast, just to be able to help to gather the interest. And through all that, new technology comes out that we use, new groups like chaos divers, people that I think traditionally maybe law enforcement wouldn't look to because they're not law enforcement, right? It's just for us, it's just being able to have all those groups come together and be able to find the resolution, because what it comes down to, the bottom line is, you want to help people. You want to get the answers for the family, and you want to find the victims.
Matt, Andrew, thank you so much for your time and for working on this case. And I'm excited to see what comes next from you guys.
Thank you for having us.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'll be honest, I don't listen to a lot of true crime podcasts. I'm not a true crime junkie. Sitting down with these two detectives really opened my eyes into what painstaking work cold case files are and what it takes to get to a resolution. So my takeaway is the work ethic, a little bit of luck, and a lot of cooperation from the community can really lead to a wonderful resolution. I can only imagine the emotions that the Schepers family has had to go through, not just in the last 42 years, but in the last several months. But to finally have some closure, I know must mean a great deal to them. That was very eye-opening in terms of what a cold case is and what it takes to get to a solution. I think these two detectives would also tell you that not everyone is going to go like this. They certainly got some breaks along the way, but I know that they're happy that it did turn out this way ultimately for the Schepers family. So that's my takeaway. What's yours? I want to see them in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed that conversation, here are some other episodes of The Takeaway, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you want to listen on the go, check us out on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.